Now, maybe in your environment, password cracking is not working out. The passwords are too difficult, or maybe you're unable to grab those hashes or steal those SAM files or those passwd files. So you might resort to other mechanisms. You could just simply sniff the network. You could just wait and hope that somebody does a login with clear text credentials against a protocol that is clear text. And you just plug in a sniffer like Wireshark. Now, of course, and we know this from Network Plus, if you're going to sniff a network and you're not doing ARP poisoning, which I'll talk about in just one second, you need to be in the same shared network segment. So you need to be like on a hub or a coax bus, which probably you won't have anymore. But this is one way to do it. And we can see here as an example that we've captured a password here, we've put it together, and we've actually found the password. Here it is, letter by letter, test password. So that's one way. Another way is, since we're probably on a switch, and the switch disallows us from sniffing things that we have no business sniffing, we'll have to ARP poison. You can use an ARP poisoner like Ettercap or Cain-Enable. And when we're ARP poisoning, the switch will now let us listen in on the conversation of other nodes. And then you use Wireshark to capture those clear text passwords. Or you have a tool like Cain-Enable that both poisons and captures and cracks all at once. Well, you do them in stages, but you have one tool that does that. So like here's an example, Cain-Enable. Cain-Enable is a really great tool. It runs on Windows, and it can go after FTP passwords, HTTP, IMAP, LDAP, POP3, SMB, Telnet. The list is much farther than this. You sniff, it has a cracker. It can go after VPNs. It can go after tokens. It can go after VoIP. So what it is that you have a server, you have a client, you're capturing usernames, and then you're capturing hashes, which we don't see here, but the hashes that are sent to the cracker. And so Cain-Enable is good in that the passwords don't have to be clear text. So that's a cool tool that you can use. You could also do something called LLMNR poisoning. LL link local multicast name resolution, LLMNR. This is something since Vista. And what it is, Microsoft joined the TCP/IP game a little later than everybody else. And, in TCP/IP, we use DNS to resolve names, right? Humans remember names much better than we remember numbers. Like I remember www.google.com better than I remember its IP address. And I'm not talking 8.8.8.8 Google DNS, because Google, the search engine, is different from just its DNS server. So we could, in TCP/IP, if we know the name but we don't know the IP, we can, in our client, like our browser, put in the name, and our machine in the background goes to a DNS server and says, hey, can you look this up? DNS in the internet, or in a private network even, is basically like the telephone directory assistance, where they, you call and they say, what city and what state, and what listing, and it looks up the number for you. Well, DNS is the functional equivalent of that. But before that, separate from that whole system, Microsoft had their whole own way of doing things. And they did what was called a NetBIOS broadcast. Back before they were using TCP/IP, they used a simple broadcast-based protocol called NetBUI. And NetBUI, everything was done by broadcast. The assumption was you only had a few computers on your network anyway. And it was just a small, self-contained network. It was certainly not on the internet. It was not connected to other networks by VPN. All that stuff came later. Well, this idea of the NetBIOS broadcast, there was a whole system called Windows Internet Naming System, WINS, and there were whole mechanisms of querying the WINS server and then doing a broadcast in case WINS didn't know. That is still available. Microsoft, to this day, 20 years, 20 plus years, 25 years later, is still supporting this. NetBIOS broadcasts. And it's broadcast based, which means that a switch is going to let everybody hear it. Because what does a switch do with a broadcast, multicast, or unknown unicast? It floods it out all ports except the one port it heard it on. You know that from NetPlus. So you could just simply be listening for those NetBIOS broadcasts. Now, of course, that's way down the list. But that's assuming that the client tries DNS and DNS can't help the client. Now, starting with Windows Vista, which is an operating system better forgotten, Microsoft had a replacement for NetBIOS broadcast. They called it the Link Local Multicast Network Resolution, LLMNR. And instead of a broadcast, it was a multicast. So the thing is that if a Vista or later, so that's Vista 2008, Windows 7, Windows 8, 10, 2016, 2012, if any of those can't look it up by DNS, they'll try to multicast. And if that fails, then they'll try to broadcast. So you could, and multicast like broadcasts are flooded out by the switch. Everybody hears it. So you could be potentially snooping those. And you can be even worse than that. You can have a tool if somebody has to resort to that. And this is especially true with internal servers that might not be in DNS, although a good Active Directory implementation will have them in its zone file. But in case they don't exist, you could have a listener, malicious app, that is listening for these NetBIOS and LLMNR broadcasts and multicasts. And when somebody says, hey, where's server something, help me, and DNS can't help them, your phony listener can say, oh, that's me, right over here. And then what'll happen is that the client will say, thank you very much, I'm trying to log in now, and you just capture the login. So how this whole poisoning thing works here. If we look at this diagram right here, we've got a client and a DNS server and a phony server here. I'm just going to scroll up a little bit here. So up here's the DNS server. The client is saying, I'm trying to find something, and the DNS server can't help. The client will then either do a NetBIOS or LLMNR broadcast or multicast saying, hey, is anybody out there this server I'm trying to find? Your attacker machine says, yeah, that's me. The client says, okay, let me log in. You say, sure, let's log in. And the client then sends over the password as a hash. And then you, the attacker, go, oh, I'm sorry, something went wrong, but you've already captured the hash. So that is LLMNR poisoning, or also NetBIOS and NBTNS poisoning. So Microsoft machines will use this when DNS lookups fail. Of course, the NBT, NetBIOS over TCP name service, is legacy. It's broadcast-based. LLMNR was the replacement starting with Windows Vista. It's multicast-based. But this is another possibility. There are spoofing tools for that. Responder is a good one. Metasploit has some. NBN Spoof, Invade, these are just a few. How on earth do we defend against password cracking? The key is to make the password long. Even more than complexity, because complexity is just simply an extended character set. Make it long. For every character that you add to a password, you are going through orders of magnitude in password cracking. It's just like looking at license plates. You know, as you're driving down the street and you see car license plates, and there's AAA something, right? Well, you have to go through all the A's just to get to AB or AAB, and you have to go through all those to get to AAC. Well, imagine going to ABA. I mean, these are orders of magnitudes more possible combinations. So the longer your password is, the harder it is to crack, even more important than complexity. Obviously, though, with dictionary tools, don't make your password something that is easy to kind of guess or social engineer out of you. So you should have a password policy that includes History, meaning you cannot reuse the same password for 10, until you've gone through 10 new ones. Length, it's got to be at least X number of characters long, like 8 characters. Complexity, it's got to use at least 3 types of characters: uppercase, lowercase, numbers, symbols. And minimum and maximum age. You have to change it after every 90 days. And you have to use it for at least 3 days. So this keeps Susie Q from resetting her password 10 times just to get back to her favorite one. Don't use passwords that are easy to social engineer, such as your date of birth or a pet's name or your spouse's name or your child's name. And you should have intrusion detection on the host as well as on the network for local and network-based dictionary attacks brute forcing. Prefer long passphrases over short, complex passwords, because a long passphrase is easier to remember. Like, it could be a passage out of a book or a movie or something, or a song lyric. That's easy for a human to remember. It's actually stronger than a short, complex password. Of course, though, if it has common dictionary words, that might be crackable. Prefer two-factor authentication. Prefer a token and a PIN, or a smart card and a PIN, or biometrics and a PIN or something, as opposed to just password. Make sure that syskey is not disabled. It's on by default. It has been on default since Windows 2000. Make sure it's not off. And that will encrypt the SAM database, which stores all the hashes. Try to avoid using any protocol that's clear text. Try to use the encrypted version. So try to use HTTPS or SFTP, or the encrypted versions of SMTP or POP or IMAP. Try to avoid storing passwords in an unsecure location, and that also means a sticky note on your monitor or under your keyboard, or if you're an application developer, in just some little text file that anybody can grab. Turn off LLMNR and NBTNA services, which means your DNS had better be working. We can see in group policy, you can go to the group policy editor, go to the local computer policy, go to computer configuration, administrative templates, network DNS client, turn off multicast name resolution. And then for NBT, go to control panel, network and internet, network and sharing, the adapter settings, the properties, TCP/IP version 4, general advanced WINS, disable NetBIOS over TCP. So if you want to follow this step, you can see how to shut these services, these non-DNS lookup services, off. So those are some other common methods, short of physical attacks, to try to get passwords.